Title: Why Minimalism is Erasing 1400 Years of Arab Design. The most sophisticated design system on Earth didn't come from Bauhaus. It came from Baghdad, from Cairo, from Córdoba. 14 centuries of geometric tiling so mathematically precise that Western scholars are still publishing papers trying to decode it. Calligraphy so refined it turned language into architecture. And right now, across the Arab world, designers are being taught to replace all of it with a sans serif font and some white space. Not because minimalism is better, because minimalism is what the client calls professional. The word they use is clean. Clean. As if centuries of ornamental tradition were somehow dirty. Welcome to the Threads of Culture, a show that unpacks design, branding, and the cultural forces shaping the global stage. Today, how one aesthetic became the invisible grammar of professionalism, and what it costs when the regions that inspired abstraction itself are told their visual language isn't modern enough. To understand how minimalism became compulsory in Arab design, you have to understand what was there before it arrived. Islamic visual traditions are not decorative in the way Western design history typically frames decoration. Geometric patterns encode theological ideas about infinity. Calligraphy doesn't just carry text, it elevates it into sacred form. The Muqarnas ceilings of the Alhambra, the tessellated walls of the Ibn Tulun Mosque, the illuminated manuscripts of Mamluk-era Egypt. These represent a design system that is simultaneously mathematical, spiritual, and aesthetic. And European modernism borrowed from it freely. Matisse filled sketchbooks in Morocco. The Bauhaus pulled from Islamic geometry without citing it. Abstraction owes a quiet, mostly unacknowledged debt to the very traditions now being overwritten. Then colonialism did what colonialism does. It interrupted production, dismantled institutions, displaced populations. Across the Arab world, design education was rebuilt on Western foundations. The Bauhaus, Swiss style, Helvetica. Designers in Beirut and Riyadh graduated fluent in grids and kerning tables, but illiterate in the visual systems their own grandparents inherited. Haytham Nawar, co-author of A History of Arab Graphic Design, put it plainly. Designers need to start by digging into their own history to enrich practice with their own heritage. The trouble is, much of that history was never archived. His co-author, Bahia Shahab, has documented the compounding reasons. Designers didn't value their own work because institutions didn't value it, and many were displaced by wars, invasions, and civil collapse. When the archive doesn't exist, it becomes very easy to claim there's nothing there to draw from. The vacuum didn't stay empty. It got filled by Silicon Valley. The MENA tech ecosystem adopted the visual grammar of San Francisco wholesale. Flat illustration, generous white space, geometric sans serifs in both Latin and Arabic scripts. Except the Arabic wasn't truly Arabic. It was Latin letter forms with Arabic shapes bolted on, stripped of the ligature intelligence and calligraphic flow that make Arabic typography a distinct system. The Gulf states' nation branding boom accelerated this. Enormous budgets, channeled through Western agencies or Western-trained designers who defaulted to the same visual playbook. The NEOM branding could belong to a fintech startup in Austin. Qatar Airways' evolving identity drifts further from the ornamental density that once distinguished Gulf visual culture. And here is where the system reveals its most uncomfortable mechanism. The cultural flattening isn't being imposed by foreign designers alone. It is frequently mediated through Arab diasporic designers working in international agencies, trained in Western programs, bringing back the only visual language they were taught. Name that clearly before assigning blame. This is not a story about betrayal. It is a story about what happens when an entire generation is educated inside one visual system and then handed the keys to another culture's identity work. When minimalism equals international clients, career advancement, and institutional credibility, and when the alternative is the quiet withdrawal of commissions and visibility, the system doesn't need villains. It just needs incentives, and it has them. What makes this particularly perverse is the timing. The global north is already moving on. Heritage branding, cultural specificity, ornamental complexity, visual density. These are gaining currency in the same Western markets that spent 2 decades exporting flatness. The Arab world is being sold yesterday's aesthetic as tomorrow's standard, buying into a visual monoculture just as the people who built it are abandoning it for something richer. But a counter-movement is forming. And it has a name. Designers and writers are calling it Islamic maximalism. The term does deliberate work. It frames ornamentation not as nostalgia, but as contemporary decolonial practice. Dazed Mina published a feature that stated it without hedging. Minimalism is not innocent. Its apparent neutrality conceals a cultural specificity, one that is Western, Protestant, industrial, and that becomes hegemonic the moment it's universalized. The designers profiled in that feature treat layered composition, calligraphic density, and spiritual symbolism as design choices made against minimalist hegemony. Not heritage projects, not museum reproductions. Living, working design that chooses complexity as a political and aesthetic position. Kinda Ghanum, a Syrian designer, started the Syrian Design Archive after realizing she had learned more about Paul Rand than about the poster art of her own country. What she found when she looked was, in her words, a treasure. Mid-century Syrian posters, packaging, stamps, an entire visual culture that conflict and curricular neglect had conspired to make invisible. Now, the argument is not that maximalism should replace minimalism. Flipping the hierarchy reproduces the problem. And Arab design is not one thing. It spans Morocco to Iraq, Amazigh to Kurdish to Nubian traditions, and packaging that diversity into a single heritage brand would replicate the exact homogenization the counter-movement is fighting. The argument is narrower than that, and harder to dismiss. The hierarchy that calls minimalism sophisticated and ornamentation excessive is not a neutral aesthetic judgment. It is a cultural value system wearing the costume of universal truth. That costume has consequences. When it encounters a tradition where ornamentation carries theological meaning, where geometric patterns encode divine infinity and calligraphy holds sacred text, stripping those elements away isn't simplifying, it's secularizing. Not openly, not deliberately, under the quiet cover of good design. So the next time a designer in Cairo or Riyadh or Beirut walks into a branding agency with work rooted in 14 centuries of visual intelligence, and someone across the table says they want something cleaner, the question worth asking is not whether the work is too complex. The question is, who decided that complexity was the problem? And whether clean ever meant anything more than familiar to the people writing the check. When you look at your own work, or the brands you consume, or the interfaces you navigate every day, how much of what you call good taste is actually a geography you inherited without choosing it? Be specific. Name the aesthetic you default to and the culture it comes from. I already know the answer. I just want to hear you say it. If this changed how you see a sans serif, it will do the same for someone who's been told their tradition isn't modern enough. Until next time, this has been The Threads of Culture.